What you're about to watch is the second of what has now become a short series of, say, game master workshops between two game masters, myself and Craig Shipman from the Third Floor Wars Media Empire. You may have already seen episode 1, where we looked at what to do next after running a one-to-one Call of Cthulhu scenario that wasn't exactly feeling right from the game master's perspective. This one is more of a deconstruction. What did you do? How did it feel? And what can be done and what could be done next. All right. So without any further ado, because we talk about everything else inside the bounds of the episode, please join me for this kind of behind the scenes discussion and breakdown, analysis, and brainstorming. One game master to another. All right, Craig, I understand that you have, I not only understand, but I have watched you and Nick running through episode 2.
Yep.
Mask of Desire, or the Shipman edition of Mask of Desire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's exactly what they recommend, right? It's a toolkit for having a Call of Cthulhu scenario focused on the strains, or the effect of the mythos on a relationship. So
yeah, and I don't think I fully realized that until you and I talked in part 1 of this video. And I think I had a much better appreciation for it. I don't know if it has lessened my critique of it, but it allowed me to get off of that horse and start just running my game, because I think I was very hung up.
You wanted more horror. You wanted more, like an escalation of shocks or something.
Either that or more tools to work with. Some more, more things that had consequences and things that mattered. And I think what really threw me off in the scenario was at the very end, what they portray as the finale of the scenario or the apex of the story. And it was a laundry list of all of these things might happen. Very few of them seem to have any type of investment or impact on the character. And then once I said, okay, that's fine. That means that's up to me. Right. And that changed how I went into episode 2.
Okay. So let's start with, it's been a week since episode 1, but it had only been 4 days or so between episode 1 and episode 2. So when you were looking back on episode 1 before running episode 2, what were you seeing, or what were you remembering?
It's obvious to me that the agency piece was big. I was not giving as much opportunities for agency as I should have, but I was also hamstrung by trying to also set the stage and kind of set the stakes. And there's a lot of preamble, which is why I think your suggestion, though I'm not sure I would have done it, I think it's a genius suggestion of started on the cab ride home from the party. I think there's a huge, excellent argument for that, because it would bypass a lot of what I struggled with. It's also obvious to me that I did not fully comprehend the intent and the focus on the relationship. I went into it as very much a traditional Call of Cthulhu type scenario that I was used to, and it's not one. And in defense of Lynn Hardy and the other writers, they make that very obvious in the book. They talk about that in the scenario book before you get to the scenarios. I had skipped over that, right? Went right to the scenario because I was in a rush, and and so that all of that's on me. All of that's on me. And in episode 2, it was very interesting to see me subtly and sometimes with a bit of a heavy hand leaning into the relationships part and then watching what happened. And the really nice effect that I saw happen, which whether it's casual or casual, Nick's investment as a player went way up.
Right. Because you got an interesting thing going on with Nick, as we mentioned in the last workshop video. We're both quite taken with him as a player, right? Mm-hmm. And he leans into in-character dialogue, and he's not afraid to allow the subject matter to affect him, right? Yep. He lets himself enjoy the situation of play, so that's nice. And but at the same time, he plays his cards very close mm-hmm. to his vest. And so you had mentioned, he hadn't played for very long, and you have some goals as a friend. I'd like to see him take more of a more active or more dominant role in a group. I'm not sure if that's what he wants, but yep. We can have goals for our friends.
and they'll like them.
And they'll like them. But it's difficult to tell when there's a decision not to act versus not being able, not realizing, whatever, all the things that are preventing action versus a decision not to act because nothing is being communicated, because this is a game of atmosphere and we shouldn't be breaking it, if at all possible, with basically player level conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And it another thing that I'm starting to realize is there's a certain level of understanding and language that I have as somebody who's played a lot of role-playing games that I take for granted. And I'm seeing Nick learn these things, which is to ask questions about the environment. And, if I not limiting myself to what I've been told and saying, well, what about this wall? Right. Or what's over there, or where am I relative to this, especially when you're dealing with theater of the mind, which is all I play now. And it was neat because I think that that's a big thing Nick is learning in this one-on-one session, is learning that he can ask these questions and he can help establish the scene, not as a writer's room scenario, but saying, I need more information for my character.
Right. As an exploration.
Yeah.
Right. And there's an interesting balance here. Like you can wind up only asking questions. Mm-hmm. Like, so we're presented as being in a restaurant, or being in a bathroom, or not a bathroom, being in an apartment, or being in a department store or something. And in some of those contexts, it makes sense to say, is there a bathroom? Right. Like a small little restaurant on a crowded New York street, is there a bathroom? Which makes no sense whatsoever in an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we can have a statement of action. I go to the bathroom. Doesn't matter where that bathroom is. Right. I'm going there. I'm going to the kitchen, or I'm going to the bedroom.
Yeah.
But you wind up with uncertainty. Can I? May I? Mm-hmm. Is there a? Or the if-then statement. They're in a bar. If there's a bowl of beer nuts on the bar, I think maybe I'd like to pick up the jar of nuts and throw it in his face as a distraction, if that's okay.
Right. Asking for permission type thing. Yeah.
But that's all tied together with what's in the environment, right? Mm-hmm. I don't believe I can put minor objects into the environment. I think this barrier is being broken down pretty quickly these days. This was a much bigger argument in the past, right? No, the game master is responsible for all the, right? But people are coming into the hobby all the time, right? And it's always somebody's first time to like be imagining in the moment and wondering if what you're imagining fits in with what I'm imagining. Right.
Yeah. Establishing the reality. Right. And color, finish painting the picture. And, one of the things that I think I'm learning too, Anthony, is I used to get very, very hyper focused on being very specific. So my descriptions would often be very long, very detailed, because I felt that burden that I needed to paint every number on the painting. And what I'm learning to get more comfortable with is let's paint the broad strokes. Let's kind of set the scene, and then let's find out. Right. And if we're in a bar and Nick says to me, Craig, is there like a bowl of nuts or something real close? We go, yeah, you're in a bar. Yes, I'm going to grab those and go. Versus, we're in a Michelin star restaurant. Craig, is there a bowl of bar nuts there? And I, as a Jim, will say, no, it's not. Right. So it's not just a blanket. We're all just going to establish the reality together. But I'm getting more comfortable instead of saying I need to describe everything that's on the bar and what type of liquor is behind the bar and things like that. Whereas I'm learning that you can use touchstones to do that. Talking about, is the floor sticky in the bar? Just that fact informs suddenly the whole painting
Right.
starts to paint out because the floor hasn't been cleaned. It's a sticky floor in the bar, or it has the smell of stale alcohol.
It has to, because the floor is sticky.
Exactly. And but that's right. That changes it from the Rockefeller, the hotel bar at the Rockefeller versus, a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah. And conversely, if you are in, this very high class upper crust bar and you do walk in and you walk into a puddle or something, it can set off the alarm bells, and you can imagine the shock and horror of the wait staff as they recognize that this mess that I'll get to it in a second.
Yeah.
So
very
all of these interesting cascade effects are fun, but we also have the idea that the player's attention is like a searchlight, and there's things that are important, almost in the way that Schindler's List was shot. We have a lot of soft focus around the outside, and we have these points of color, right, that are really pulling our attention in. We have these things. We only have so much time to describe. We only have so much bandwidth to describe. But when the player directs their attention at the bar and they fill in a detail, well, that's an opportunity to collaborate. And much like the universe taking shape, you can just spill out, and we fill in some extra details, and that's all nice. But all of this is still on the passive scale, right? This is the receiving information, right? The player is using their character to navigate in the environment, which is steps toward being active.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get to episode 2, your major goal was to get him investigating.
Yeah,
I think. Did you feel that Curtis had a reason to investigate rather than shadow Anna, or hang out with Anna?
So I mean, the ultimate answer is he did, right? So we did see Curtis act, we did see Curtis investigate. There was, and this is not a criticism, because I think this is an easy mistake. I'd be interested if you agree with this. I think it is very easy for a GM to underestimate how much information that they're giving players. And I think I've always had a fear of tipping my hand or being too heavy-handed about giving clues and stuff, and that I'm cheating the player because I'm force feeding them. But I'm realizing being a player more than, because I used to be just a GM, but I'm playing more now than I ever have in my entire life. And I'm realizing it's not as obvious when you're on the other side of the screen, and it doesn't feel as forced as the player as it does when you're doing it as the GM. And I think an example of that was me reinforcing and reminding him of the papers with the kanji symbols on them. And if you watch episode 2, you'll see me do it more than once. And I don't think he felt it was forced at all. I don't think he felt forced into that, but it's weird reality, Anthony, because like I know what's important. And in my head as the GM, I know that those are important, right? Or that Madame de Tasson is important. And I think it's real easy to forget as a GM that your players don't know what the fuck the story is. Right? They don't know what's happening next. They don't know what's really going on. And it's hard for them to tell whether the fact that the bag is lavender, is that significant? Well, could be just as significant as the fact that there's kanji symbols on these sheets of paper. The player doesn't necessarily know that. And I think we as GMs need to be okay with helping them a little bit, but without obviously swinging the entire way, which is just
what you need
railroading.
to do next is this.
Yeah.
But one thing you said, they don't really know. You said two things. They don't know what the story is, and they don't know what's really going on.
Right.
And I think those two ideas are often conflated when they're not. What's really going on is what NPC X wants to do or has already done. Right. That's an established part of the universe. It's not the story. Right. So, for example, Peter Reston, prior to the session starting, has contacted Madame de Tisson about passing this particular mask to his son, Lucas. That's a thing that is going on.
Right.
That is not the story.
Right.
Right. And if you're in my camp of preferences, and it's just preference, if you're in my camp of preferences, story is byproduct of play.
And I completely agree. Yeah.
So in this particular type of scenario where our focus is on the relationship, as long as we have the opportunity for Nick playing Curtis to interact with Anna, the NPC, as an on again, off again romantic interest affected by the mythos in this way, then we are successful, right? If he can come away with this with memories or feelings or reactions or some bleed over the tragedy of this, then we are successful. Or we could be successful by having an investigation that starts in a dinner party and leads to the mask going to Anna, and Anna using it to be successful in her audition, or being persuaded not to use it, and whatever happens, being successful or unsuccessful. That's story, and that's story as product. Yeah. This is the experience I want you to have. And although I don't like story as product, it doesn't mean it's not fun, and doesn't mean that there aren't millions of people out there who will function better and more enjoyably doing it. But when you're using a published scenario and people are watching, and we have some other goals like genre, like I want it to be scary or creepy or unsettling or something like that, all of these things can conspire to push our goal in a different direction than we think, to a different direction than we think it's pointing, so we end up saying to ourselves, story is byproduct, but what we're actually doing technically as a game master is producing story.
Yeah.
And then we think, why didn't the players do anything, or why did everything seem to stop? And it may be because we're working at cross purposes for our own. Yeah.
I'll tell you what was interesting to me, Anthony, and I know we mentioned before we started recording that you hadn't had a chance to watch the whole thing. I don't know.
I've seen all of part two.
Oh, you did? Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you hadn't watched the whole thing. So walking away from it, here's what I was very happy with. And I'm sure there'll be more of these as we continue talking, but this ties to what you and I have just got done discussing. I was really happy with what happened with him and Lucas. I felt, like it's possible that this could end up being the story of Curtis and Lucas
becoming friends for real.
Yeah. And him, maybe, who knows what happens with Anna, but it could be him saving Lucas. And that was not that was, we talk about this predetermined thing. That was not part of what I thought was in play. But as we were playing and I saw how he was reacting to Lucas and how he was acting to Lucas, that I realized that this was a relationship that Nick was bonding with and was connecting with. And it was a lot of fun to lean into that. And I think one of the things that, I threw out there, which again was not something that I had that just came up in play, but I saw the impact it had on us. There's a moment when, Curtis has now become more assertive. Curtis is now like, Lucas is useless. After being, just decimated by his father. And there's a moment, I'm sorry.
And Anna.
Yeah. There's a moment when, and I'm not sure where it came from. It came from play. As the answer is, Curtis says to him, he goes, or Lucas says to him, Curtis, like you always save me. You're always there.
Always there for me.
Yeah. And like, I saw that affect Curtis and Nick, and put some momentum in play, which I thought was really cool to watch.
Right. Yeah. And so you have the good vehicle for villainy in Peter Reston in The Father, where he could have been background material. He could have been reason for Lucas's dual nature.
Yep.
Right. The being a bully and because he's bullied. Right. So we've got the two sides. Right. Or he can step forward. But this brings us into the next thing that I hope we could talk about is complication of the scenario in progress.
Okay.
Like I think we've all been there. We get this idea. It's like, oh, I could. And then things start to snowball in situ preparation. Right. And then any hope we had of the players being able to logically hold onto the course of action that they're starting to form, we're now working against. It's like, oh, I got this great. I'm going to go to the bank vault, or I'm going to go check his diary, and you go, and there's nothing there. Because there's this new layer of complication, right? I've invented an NPC secretary who's cleaning up all the clues.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is there nothing here? All the clues pointed there being something here. Well, maybe there was, but there isn't now.
Right.
Screw this game, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that it's hard to let go of that, Anthony. And I think that is I've talked a lot about, my Rumpelstiltskin of skipping 20 years of role playing. And that's something that I think definitely changed is I am now far more comfortable with the type of expectations on the GM now for play than before, because when I was, in the 80s and 90s, it was, let's all sit in and watch Craig's story. And we happen to have character sheets too. Right. And, the level of play that happens now and the level of discovery and cooperation and collaboration that happens now, and being a GM that allows that to happen, and not allows it because it's a permissive thing, but enjoys it. Like, that's what we're doing.
Right.
Is discovering this together. And that's a lot more fun than it was back in the 80s, I can tell you.
Yeah. The idea of you must be prepared before play has definite spin-off effects. And we made long ago assumptions about what preparation meant. And of course, this is informed by whatever games you started out playing. If you were lucky enough to have the Ghostbusters RPG as your first role-playing experience, your idea of what preparation is would be vastly different than if you were a basic or advanced D&D player. But that's all culture of play stuff. So let's do a quick recap of of episode 2, right?
Sure.
Opens up with Curtis coming back from the bagel shop. He has his load of delectables, lets himself in, and we kind of rewind time a little bit, and Anna and Lucas are having their showdown because now she is assertive, and he's very confused, and maybe he's failed a sand check, and so he's having a little fugue. He's not really clear on the details, that kind of thing. And I thought it was interesting that the mask communicated its instructions to Anna and not to Lucas. I thought that's just a neat detail.
Yeah, and it was very funny because when I in my head, I was just like, because I like the detail that you just can't put on the mask. I like the detail of the blood being necessary. And then I was just like, well, wait a second. She can't read the symbol? Like, this is all happening split second in play. I'm like, oh shit, there's an inconsistency here because she can't read the kanji,
right? Yeah.
Right. She can't have the kanji symbol, right? She can't read the instructions and know that matters. And, but I like the fact that not just anybody can put on the mask. And that's when it just hit me. Like, then it was just like the mask called her, right? And she went into like this trance and cut her finger and did it, which I ended up liking. And it added a whole nother layer to this mask, right? That this mask was now no longer just this passive tool. Now
it has its own goal.
Presence. Yeah. Which ended up working out really well, I think.
Yeah. That the mask isn't just some strange artifact like a ring of invisibility or
right.
Just a second.
Oh, pop. Yeah.
This is the classic situation of, I want to go out so I can come in. He wants up so he can be put down. I guess. Sure. I'm going to put you down. You're short. You smell funny. All right now. All right. So yeah, it's not just an object. It's not a tool. Now, one of the things about the scenario that I find a little odd is that the mask itself is tied to the chocho, which makes a certain amount of sense. But then it's tied to Haster. I don't find a lot of real synchronicity between it and Haster, but that's a nice seed for later if they find out as a detail that blah 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 associated with some strange cult not relevant to this investigation. But then later on you decide to have something to do with he who is not to be named. Then it's always a nice callback, and as long as we remember to keep the footprint of the mythos small, right? Not have it's not a bestiary, right? It's not a monster manual. They're all here, right? New York is full of alien beings.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's cool. So then she departs, right, in an un-Anna-like fashion, and Curtis wants to discuss with Lucas about this change, but Lucas has just been punched in his ego.
Yep.
And like I said, he's in this fugue state, and then Dad shows up, and this final straw for Dad, who takes on a pretty villainous aspect, and then he leaves, and the only one who can act, right? There's now a vacuum, right? The only one that can act is Curtis. And then we have the agony of the player, right? I'm at the beginning of investigation. I have a variety of leads. Which one do I follow, right? And so it was nice, I felt, that Lucas wasn't useless, right? That Lucas is a sounding board for what we can do. So he remembers Neinart's name because he's been at parties with Neinart before. And so that can be thrown out there, and Lucas can ask questions in a submissive way. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And so that's helpful for getting the investigation moving. But at a certain point, you start throwing up roadblocks to everything.
Interesting.
I was very curious about that.
So walk me through that.
Okay. So they decide, I don't remember the details of how they decide to go to Madame de Tisson's place. But by comparison, going to talk to Neinart was easy.
Yes.
Going to talk to Anna was easy, right?
Yes.
So they go, they're already weirded out. They go, they get more weirded out. They say, we've got to do something. We only have a few hours, So they go talk to Neinart to try and understand what the notes mean. So they duck into a tailor shop. They can use the phone. They reach Neinart. Neinart's happy to meet them, right? They don't have any trouble finding the place. He's not murdered in the office. So
Yeah.
So they can go talk to him, but he doesn't really understand the notes.
Mm-hmm.
No roles are needed here, right? But a lot of doubt about what the situation is introduced. So now we're wrestling with what's really going on. Lucas is saying she's not wearing the mask. Curtis is saying she has to be wearing the mask, right? But he wasn't able to really feel it, right? He could see it, but he can't feel it. So again, right. Doubt. Maybe she's just wearing makeup or something. So we had a lot of doubt. We're carrying a lot of doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the hotel where we're not really expecting to get anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Not like talking to an expert on East Asian studies.
Right.
So there's a doorman who doesn't want to let us in. There's an elevator operator who doesn't want to take us up. We got to go talk to the concierge. He doesn't want to. She doesn't answer the phone. Well, because she's dead.
Right.
What's really going on is she's dead. Right. And well, can you call again? Okay. Right. And then finally we get to go up. And we go up. And the body's under a sheet.
Mm-hmm.
There are those players out there who will not peel back the sheet.
Yes.
There are those players out there who right at that moment will walk backward out of the apartment and go to the cops.
Mm-hmm.
And there are others who will toss the place and try and bribe the elevator man to say nothing, that kind of stuff. But so she's under a sheet. And the guy in the basket. The key point about the guy in the basket is his face, but he's face down.
Yeah, I know.
So these are a lot of steps that get introduced probably in an improvisational. I don't think you sat at home and think I'm going to put him upside down in the.
No. Yeah.
So this came in the moment.
It did. And I'll tell you, there's a couple things that happened, I think, in the hotel. And a lot of some of it was tied to our conversation, because I don't think I sold or not sold. I don't think I gave as good a picture of this is not your world when we had the party and then, just going up there. So I was doing a little bit of backfilling there.
Sure.
I even created a new truth in retro, which is like you showed the invitation to get on the elevator, which did not happen in session 1.
Right.
So there's a couple things I was doing, and some of it was meta and some of it was just an improv. Like, all right, what is the situation? These guys are coming in here. They're not just going to let them go up to this private apartment. Right. So I thought that these roadblocks were realistic. I didn't think that I was just throwing stuff in front of Nick.
Right.
But I was also,
they're a part of the level, right? He's a reporter. He's going to face exactly this roadblock in every investigation. The character gets played in, right? So what's built the character that enables him to get through this fast talk, persuasion,
right?
An expense account of some kind, a rich, powerful friend. How is he going to do this? Yeah, so it's all fine. It just adds up, right?
It does add up, and it may have been a little too much, right? But I
don't know. He seemed pretty happy at the end of the session, but it's just interesting to think about.
He did, and there's two things happening. So I'll talk in a second about the sheet and the basket. But what was happening down there was I wanted to push Nick to as a player. So this is the meta level. Like I wanted to put some roadblocks in him so he was pushing through things, not just walking through the world.
Sure.
That I wanted him to have obstacles that he had to think about and attack. And I was okay if he, gave up and left. Right. I'm going to follow him. I'm going to Jared Logan's phrase, which I don't know if it's his, but it's the first time I heard it and I love it, is laying track in front of the players, just barely being in front of them as they're walking and just laying that track as they go, as opposed to building the whole rail and then pushing them down the track, but it's different when they get up there. So, and this is probably a style thing, Anthony. One of the reasons I enjoy horror, one of the reasons it's my favorite genre of role playing as a player and as a GM, is the same moments that happen to me when I'm reading horror or watching horror. And I know what's under that sheet, right? And there is that time of, I'm going to pull the sheet back. I already know what's there, or maybe I don't know what's there, but those moments and that tension that happens at the table, I really love. And to the point where maybe stylistically, it's possible I stretch that too much. If you go back and watch a lot of my other horror stuff, you can tell that that's my favorite. Right. And so, yes, he could have walked into the bedroom and the body would have been there. And I wouldn't have changed anything, but having the sheet covering her, it just adds something for me stylistically that I really enjoy.
Right.
And
you deserve to have that in the session too, right? You're not a McDonald's. Right.
Yeah. And also, I've got, but also I've got to be careful though, that it doesn't become
the only thing.
The only thing, or it doesn't hurt play, right? It's okay if it enhances play. But I got to be careful with it. But I paid a little bit of a price with the basket. Yeah. Right. So I wanted the same moment. I wanted him to pull that body out and look at this guy's face and right. And he didn't.
Well, who would?
Right. So I was like, shit.
Who would?
And go ahead.
If he did, he's dead. Okay.
Yeah. And
he walked. I know all I need to know.
Exactly. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that is all he needed to know. Right. So, and I'll tell you, because I was thinking this all real time, I was going to be okay if you never saw that.
Sure. That was one of the things you were looking forward to most. I remember you saying in our first workshop is the reason why I picked this scenario was the guy with no face.
Well, I also think it's also informative. I also think it moves things forward when you make the connection, because I think it's important to establish.
You can't just take it off.
You can't just take it off, right? And I also feel like part of the stakes in this scenario is Anna is in danger. Yeah. And when you realize that this guy used to have the mask on, does not have the mask on anymore, and it probably killed him, I think it ups the stakes. Now, what I loved, and I don't know if you noticed this, is Nick was like, something I hadn't thought of. In my mind, Dita took the mask off him. Right. That was the truth that I had in my mind as a GM. Nick introduced this thing of, did this guy cut the mask off himself?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I like that as much, if not better. Right. So yeah, we don't know. I'm okay with that being the Schrodinger's cat. Right. We don't know what happened. I think that's great. But yeah, so it was definitely two different experiences there, but and maybe with the wrong different table, it wouldn't have worked, but there was going to the professor helped a little bit, right? It gave a little bit of context. It introduced the concept of desire and that, and wearing and that. So that establishes a little bit for him to work with and starts to form this mass a little bit.
It's a core part of mysteries too. You get information around what you're looking for. You still have to sift through it. But the reason why I brought it up in sequence is just that there was a sequence of almost could be interpreted as the game master saying, you really want to do that?
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I hadn't thought of that because that was definitely not what I was thinking. Right. But yeah, I could definitely see that of me discouraging him going up there.
Or you obviously didn't, but it's something to consider because
it's something to watch.
It's not all players, right?
Yep. That's a really good point. Really good point. And I think the other thing is, so GM Craig didn't want them to get caught by the police.
Why not?
right? Because I want them to have the reign of the city. I want them to go back and get Anna. I want but that's where we ended up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we could have ended up anywhere else.
Well, there are plenty of people who would not have brought the consequences of the decisions into play, but I think it's better that they, for what you're going for, I think it's better that they come into play. So if they had gone in with Sam, the elevator operator, then they're going to have to give statements to the police and don't leave town kind of thing, but they would not have been under suspicion.
Yeah.
If they had gone in, seen signs of violence and run right back out and said, dude, there are signs of violence, same thing. The only way to get arrested is to spend loads of time in the apartment.
Yep.
And then come out and say, covered with blood spatter, saying, she's in there dead and we didn't do it. Let's call the cops because we're innocent. Yeah.
And the other thing that I thought
which made perfect sense in the moment.
It did.
So it's really good that you allowed the police to come. I think it will be relatively easy for Curtis to explain to the police what happened once all the statements are taken, right? But there's a time factor.
Exactly, right. And I like that because now that has turned up a little bit, right? That it was kind of like we've got time. Well, now you are downtown. And it's why I emphasized at the end there, like, let's kind of do a quick recap of this situation. You now know how much danger Anna potentially is in right now.
Yeah.
And you're under suspicion from a double murder. Now, the one decision that I made, and I'm very happy with this because, again, it was made in play, spontaneous. It made sense to me, but I could have very easily have put blood all over Curtis too. I very deliberately put it on Lucas because I was leaning into this relationship, and I liked the role that Curtis was taking. And for him, like, it was obvious to me he really was bonding with the Lucas character. So now I can put Lucas in danger, right? I can up the stakes with Lucas. And now, I made it very obvious that the cops are like, you can't go anywhere, and he's got blood on his hands. So I really am excited, Anthony, to see what Nick does. I'm happy that we're having a whole week before the next session because I know how Nick works, because there's a lot of ways out of this, to your point. Probably the easiest way is call Dad.
Right. And this opens up, if it feels good that Dad is a villain, right? Like if this were television, Dad's villainy would be revealed to the audience at the end of every episode.
Right.
But the characters have no idea that Dad's a villain, right? So they've gotten their first hint that why did Papa Reston want this mask for his son? Mm-hmm. Right? Just to make him more assertive? Is it coming from a place of love? But this gives you an opportunity for him to say, okay, I've got no reason, I told you I'm done with you. Why are you calling me? Right. Mm-hmm. But dad, we got to get the mask off Anna's face or she might die. It's like, what are you willing to do for me?
Mm-hmm. Well, and so here's the other thing that I wanted to definitely talk with you about, because, and you just kind of hinted at it, is what does this mask mean to Peter? Is for Peter, is this now over? His son didn't get the mask. His son didn't wear the mask. I'm done with you. Right. So it's possible Peter doesn't give a shit about the mask anymore. He definitely doesn't give a shit about Anna.
The mask is a means to an end, which makes is the pursuant to your earlier point of what's clear to the players. If we suddenly build a vast criminal empire for Peter, of which this mask is a tiny moving part, not only will this one shot never end,
right.
the likelihood of it surviving episode to episode as something that fuels satisfying improv is really low.
Yep.
We end up just chasing the tail of the idea. So if he and Madame de Tisson move in different circles, but they overlap, right? And he finds a way to call in a marker on her. He wants this, right? She owes him. She doesn't want, she's got other reasons to use this mask, right? She's upset and unhappy that she has to give it to him. He wants it for his son. His son gives it to this floozy.
Yep.
Right. And so why am I even trying to fix my son? I should just make another son. Yeah. That kind of stuff. But if I can get him under my thumb, maybe, right? What can you do for me? What can Curtis do for me? There could be something in there that just points to him as villain and doesn't have to go any farther than that.
And I think because there's a lot of potential truths here, right? Like, who killed de Tisson? Right now that's unknown at the table, right? And it could it have been Peter, or by Peter's actions that she was killed? And the answer is yes, right? We could easily make that a truth. Yeah, lead that as a truth, but there's an important thing, which is Peter knows where the mask is. So it's critical. And if he's cleaning up and he's covering tracks, or if he is determined to get the mask, Anna's already dead. Right? Because Peter knows. And I don't think that's super interesting right now if that happens. So I think we're going to go.
There's always kidnap to take to a quiet location because the heat is on, because my son was just arrested.
Yes. Yeah. And we could see that potentially there, but I've also still got Tanaka, right? And what's good about Tanaka is having Tanaka's 2 steps behind. He killed her. He came to the Tissons to find the mask and
stays behind.
Killed her.
Right.
So he's behind. So he doesn't know where it is for Anna, but he's in the shadows. They don't know. The Lucas and Curtis doesn't know that he is hot on their trail. I like that. So
we could speculate that he's talking to Neinart out in the party. The crazy guy is being relieved of the mask, or is relieving himself of the mask. Either way, the Tisson stuffs him in the chest for later, wraps up the mask, and sends it off with waitstaff, right, to be delivered. And then she comes back out to the party, and everybody else leaves. Tanaka stays behind, threatens her for the mask. The mask is gone. In a fit of pique, he kills her. I have some trouble with the katana on the floor, but there could be reasons for that. And he flees the scene, right? Shows up the next day, or his thug shows up the next day tailing the boy. And so now, if the boy is dead, then while Curtis and Lucas are at the police station, this is a great opportunity for them to find out that the delivery boy is dead.
Yes.
I don't know how useful that might be to their particular investigation, but it's a good opportunity for them to find this out in some fashion. Right.
Yeah, it brings the danger closer, right? It's one thing to have the danger and the death in a hotel in New York. It's another one to have it in the alley behind your brownstone.
Right. So one thing that occurs to me is that Tanaka doesn't necessarily need to kill anybody. He wants the mask.
Right.
So if both of these malefactors are out there malefacting, then Tanaka can take Anna off the street.
Yes.
Reston's goons can witness this. So Reston doesn't have the girl. Reston wants the girl. He springs his useless son and his reporter buddy to get more eyes, and more motivated eyes, looking for Anna. Tanaka's burning time trying to persuade Anna to give up the mask freely.
Right.
because she's an innocent, right? Which gives them time to, because we have to remember who all these characters are. I don't think Tanaka's just a cardboard, doesn't have to be a cardboard villain, with guns and in the Chandlerian sense of,
Mhm.
if things are boring, have him burst in and threaten people.
Right.
He could be more nuanced than that, especially because you have a third episode. So that gives them some thing to track down. But witnesses, we saw her
Mhm.
taken into a bread van or whatever.
Or Emily shows up. Emily can report it, right? If she was with Emily, they were shopping and these goons showed up and threw her into a car.
Right.
And there could be, easily some clues there. If they go after, if they suspect Reston, we can potentially, make it clear that it wasn't Reston or make them doubt that or whatever. So here's what I think I need to do, now that we're talking through this, is Tanaka is in your mind and in my mind because of the conversations we've had, right? Tanaka is long gone in the scenario. He's a side character that the professor, who now has had some importance, was just talking to. And right. So one thought I had is the feeling that Tanaka's two steps behind is somehow the professor, and I don't know how I would do it necessarily, or just wait for it if it happens, but the professor coming back to Lucas and Curtis and going, 2 hours after you guys left, Tanaka came into my office. And I thought he was going to kill me.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I'll show you one of my cards.
Yeah.
They're in holding. They've been interrogated and whatnot. And suddenly they're sprung. Waiting to take them away from the station is Tanaka.
Yeah.
And as they leave, Dad's lawyer or whoever they called is going up the steps. But it's basically Tanaka showing up saying, "Come with me if you want to live."
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And they're completely comfortable. Like, you're free to go. And he's like, well, I called my dad. Right. And then they step out and Tanaka's there. That could be very, very interesting. And that could be a neat shock too, for Nick, because again, this Tanaka, like, what the hell's he doing here? Right.
Your girlfriend is in great peril.
Yeah. Yeah. Something's happened to your girl. You need to come with me. And even coming off, though I'm sure they'll be suspicious, but even trying to like trick them into thinking that he's a benefactor in this, and somehow helpful in this. And we could even make that a scenario where Tanaka doesn't know where Emily is. Right. And I think that's possible. Right. So now he has to go to Lucas and Curtis.
Where would she have gone? Right. He finally figures out who's wearing the mask. Right. He knows Neinart knows Reston. Reston has talked to, so we can.
Exactly. And it's possible too that Tanaka thinks, like, it's possible Tanaka throws them into the limo, and the goons throw him in the limo. Tanaka's in the car. Right. That's the shock, is when you get thrown into the car and there's Tanaka. It's like, holy shit. Right.
It's the communist.
And Tanaka does the same thing to both Curtis and Lucas that Peter did to Lucas. He grabs their face
and checks. Yeah.
And checks. Yeah. So now we know that Tanaka doesn't know that Emily has the mask.
This is good.
But now the two of you are going to tell me who does, or you're both effing dead. Right. I'm going to continue to kill until I get to the mask.
Right. So he can be overt villain or he can be hero. But at a certain point in play, something has to be established.
Yes. Right. And I'm flexible on that. I am. I mean, these are all things that and when I say all these things out loud, and I think you know that, but I want to make sure people watching do, I'm not saying that that's all true yet. Right. What I'm learning to get real comfortable with is having my mise en place in front of me saying, Peter, could be the big villain here. Peter could care about the mask. Peter could not care about the mask. Tanaka could come into play. Tanaka could be, trying to save everybody from this goddamn mask. Like, you guys need to give me the mask so I can get rid of it. Right.
Or
Not
use it in the war effort.
Whatever. Right. Or he's a megalomaniac. Right. Or, whatever it might be. I enjoy, or I'm gaining more comfortable allowing all of that to be amorphous in front of me, and then just wait and see what feels right when.
Right.
And I'm not an expert at this yet, but I'm getting a lot more comfortable with it.
Now, the effect that has is that it ceases to be an investigative scenario and becomes something else.
Okay.
Right. So, imagine that you had prepared a series of handouts. You have character sheets with motivations and agendas for each of the characters, and you begin play being true to those portrayals. There's a body of thought that says, if it's not said in play, it's not real, which is what you're talking about. And then there's another body of thought saying that the preparation informs play and informs improvisation to some degree, right? So if to use this in the negative context of how this can be what I consider to be a less beneficial outcome, the players latch on to who the villain is in the Scooby-Doo sense, real unsatisfyingly early for them and for you. And that character, quote, is the villain, end quote. And so you change it in play so that that character is not the villain, so that we can have the satisfaction of discovering the villain, layers of discovery later on.
Right.
We're ignoring what we accepted as truth, right? So we make ourselves liars in order to deliver the experience, which is now putting us in the story as product camp rather than story as byproduct. So why can't we have the awesome thing where they discover who the villain is really early and they move in and they can prove it and the session is over? What's wrong with that?
I don't know if I'm saying that there is anything wrong with that.
No, but out there,
right. Gotcha.
Out there on the internet,
got it.
There are those who do, right? So we settled down to play for, it's a campaign, but they figured out who the big bad was too early. What do I do? Let them. Or if this experience of story is important to you, be able to change things on the fly without, and hopefully you'll be able to cover your tracks without leaving trail. So we don't know anything about Tanaka. He was an argument about communism,
right,
at a dinner party, right? So this is going to be a pretty big reveal, no matter who or what he is. But somebody out there has killed Madame de Tisson. And
I know who that is.
Something violent has happened to the crazy guy from the party.
Yeah.
And somebody was following the delivery boy. And
that I'm not changing. Right. So that's all Tanaka. Okay. Though I do have to, in my mind, de Tisson killed the madman.
Sure.
And so I agree with everything that you said. And I guess
why does she kill him? Why does she cut the mask off his face? Doesn't she know, or does she do that on purpose?
So in my mind, the truth is that she is under an incredible amount of threat and pressure from Peter.
Oh, there you go.
So in my mind, he won't
give it up, but he's crazy.
Well,
it's past the point where he can give it up. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So he came in there. He wants to get rid of it. It's talking to me and things like that. In my mind, he went into the bedroom and she's like, well, give it to me. And he can't let it go.
Or it won't let him go.
Or it won't let him go. And she and I don't see just her as a killer, but I'm seeing Peter, he's her lawyer. He has incredible amount of information and pressure on her. Right. And who knows, he might even have power of attorney. Right. Who knows? and he's just like, all of this is gone if I don't get this mask, right? I mean, it could drive somebody to murder.
Sure.
Or it could have been also, she was attacked. It does, and almost that doesn't matter, especially now that she's dead. But so for me, I guess what I'm saying, these are things that I haven't decided yet, or I'm open to.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm going to like, if
I know you're preparing to improvise. It's preparation for improvisation.
Yeah.
But it can look like.
And I've got lanes, right? It's not like I'm also saying, well, maybe Tanaka's Superman, right? Like that could be a possibility, right? I'm not going that way, right? I'm saying that there's a couple things that I think are consistent.
Right.
Exactly. And I like that. And part of me wants to satisfy play as well. And I feel like I'm starting to get an instinct for that, which I didn't used to have. And I'm developing this, which is, having maybe two things, and they don't have to be polar opposite things, right? Like, for example, we know Tanaka wants the mask. That's a given for me, right? That's part of a truth that's in this world, whether Curtis knows it or not. But why does Tanaka want it? Is he truly the, twirly mustache villain? Or is he, the Hans Gruber who, has, is somebody you can understand, that he wants to help Japan, and, and just all kinds of things, like there's all kinds of possibilities there. I'm open to all of that. And part of that, I honestly think would happen when how do they deal with him at first?
Right? Yeah, maybe like when you have to be him.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can maintain the thread of consistency of past action that he's done that they know nothing about, because they may discover what he's done, and then,
right.
So, yeah, that's all cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the one last thing I wanted to make sure we covered, because I'm very interested in this, is you very clearly saw, the first half, the halftime show, and then the second half. And I would like to know what you saw changed, both for me and for Nick. So what did the halftime talk do in your mind?
We established that you had been feeling that Nick was put into an observer's role, right? You described it as watching a Call of Cthulhu movie. It wasn't that bad. But the setup of episode 1 has him receiving an awful lot of information, let's put it that way. And the opportunities that he had to act in the scene either amounted to nothing in terms of play, right? He got to say a few things, or he got to look at something, or he was prevented, right? I'm going to mix with a group of these high society people, but before you can, the door is kicked open and madness ensues. And then so his moment to play is really in the brownstone with the box. He has basically total freedom there, right? He could have just put the box in Lucas's room. He could have, but he was able to open it and start the mystery, right? So in terms of, did this change for episode 2? Not really. He had total freedom at the end of episode 1. It says for most of episode 1, it wasn't there. Right? So in episode 2, we have our brief setup, like, let's remind ourselves about how Anna has changed. Let's introduce this thread from episode 1 about the father asked me to get the mask, and I'm really upset about it. So then Dad comes in, makes his ultimatum, gives us a time limit, right? And then storms out, right? You're dead to me, kind of thing. And now you didn't say it, but you basically, in letters of sky, it was, what do you do now? Or, letters of fire in the sky, what do you do now? And he did, right? He wanted to confirm information. So he confirmed that through Lucas. So what I had hoped in episode 1, that it becomes kind of a buddy picture with Lucas and Curtis, this comes to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And So now it really is kind of a triangle, right? And so are they just going to hang out with Anna? They could have, right? They go find her, and but then enough doubt is introduced that, well, let's find some more information. And I think Nick commented at the end, it's really good I didn't hold her down and try and peel the thing off her face in the restaurant.
It would have made for a different scenario.
But still ending with the police coming.
Yeah.
This is a railroad.
And we answered the question of the scenario book, which is, does love forgive?
Right. Her last words, I always loved you. So, yeah. And then I'm not sure that, like you were talking about the density of information, right? There's no way that anybody would remember Neinart's name if it was even given.
Yeah.
But it's reasonable that Lucas is familiar with him from other dinner parties. We established that Neinart feels a certain, Reston probably donates to the university, right? So, all this makes sense. So he goes and he gets information there. We could question how useful was this information. It has to be obscured somewhat. Was it obscured too much? That's actually for Nick to decide, not me, and not you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how they end up at the hotel is Lucas. Lucas pushes. And I think this is the desire to show the face with no mask. It's an essential piece of information. I don't really think Curtis would have gone there.
Yeah, and the one thing I will tell you is I had made the choice, like, I'm going to bring it up one more time. And he happened to take it that time. Right. But I was also already starting to get comfortable with it not happening. And when I say not happening, I mean them being up there. She was dead regardless, right?
Right.
And I was starting to think, how am I now? What's next, right? How do it's important
to me
learn
that this essential information? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I did, put the finger. I used Lucas to put the finger on the scale a little bit. Not a little bit. It was pretty heavy-handed, but
that time it was a little. Lucas deciding to pick up the body, that was,
yes, very much so.
That was putting your finger on the scale to launch the weight into orbit. But it was fun, right? So yeah, that was very much but wait, there's this thing over here, yeah, and that leads to them being arrested. So now that you've got them arrested, the thing you didn't want to have happen has happened because of you.
Yeah.
There should be some kind of reward is not the word I want, but it's the word that stuck in my head. So an opportunity to learn, because they're arrested, they lose time to investigate further, which means the onus is on them to act once they get out of the Huskow.
Mm-hmm.
So their opportunity to gather some important information in the Huskow shouldn't be denied to them.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
So they can come out armed with some ideas. And if you decide to go with Dad shows up and presses them into service, or Tanaka shows up and presses them into service, or enlists their aid, or whatever it is, they will understand what's going on. So it's not, there's a trail of bodies across the city, and
it'll be interesting. I'm very interested to see, because I know Nick, the player, has never been in this type of a situation. And I would be more concerned about this if I had not seen him connect so well with Lucas. So I feel like, I suspect that for Curtis and thus Nick, it is really important not only now to get Anna safe, but also to get Lucas safe. And I'll be very interested to see to what ends he'll do to make that happen. And I'll follow him, I guess, and see what happens. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Yep.
It'll be good.
This is great again, man. I think this is very enjoyable for me to
Deconstruct.
hear. Yeah. And it's because I think this is a rare, and you and I've talked about this. It's not very, I mean, usually these conversations are happening with your players. Right. And you can't really have this level of conversation with your players between sessions. You might be able to do it after it's all over.
Right. And it might be years later,
Exactly.
Forgotten everything.
And how often is it that and this is something that I love about APs. How often is it that another GM can see your game in progress, and that that you have the a level of omnipotence that and there's information I can discuss with you and share with you that I really can't do with anybody else, and that's cool. It's cool, and I think it makes me want to do this more, because I know it's helpful for me, and I suspect for people watching it can be helpful. And and you and I talked about a little bit, like, I think there's a real idea here and what we're doing, and I don't know exactly what it is yet. Right. I just know I like it.
But I mean, this is the process of learning, right? When if you go down to your human resources department, it's this kind of thing, the after action report and whatnot that's involved. So one thing I'm going to do as a part of this effort is I'm collecting clips from episode 1, and I'm inserting comments.
Awesome.
I'm not inserting my opinion, because as we talked about in the last workshop, there's only so far that the talking head opinion can go. That armchair quarterbacking thing is there are times when you're just wrong. You don't have full information. So I like to have both sides of, what were you thinking when this happened? I was panicking because, whatever. Or I was caught up in the moment. The character spoke to me. And stuff. So I'm going to go through and just insert, what is happening here? Or, watch how the noble plumed shipman rises up from the reeds of description to offer.
So here's the part where the player NPC Lucas
gets them arrested. No.
That's right.
Yeah. So just to ask questions and whatnot. So we can talk about the cool trigger. We were talking about cascading triggers of description, right? The cigarette smoke in the party is not just a visual or olfactory sensation. It's a series of things, and it brings a certain layer of reality in with it, and being able to identify things as a shorthand for setting the stage, the sticky floor in the bar, the tinny jukebox sound, or there's a variety of things that do that they punch above their weight class,
very much so,
in terms of sensory stuff.
So the last thought I just had real quick, so we wrap this up, is I want you to consider this, which is, when this is all said and done, you and Nick having a conversation without me. That
Sounds
potentially could be very interesting, I think. And doing it before he watches these videos.
Right.
So he's unsoiled.
Innocent.
But I think that could be a very interesting conversation that he could have with you that he couldn't have with me. That would be very beneficial to him, I think, and then again for people watching. So, all right, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Appreciate it.